program. Really, we don't need a whole lot of introductions for Karen Dostal. She is the president of our chapter, and she has been on the board for many, many years. She's been in the community for many years as well. But today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what she will be presenting to you, to give you a little precursor. And just a summary, I'm going to summarize what was in the newsletter here. So during the winter of 2024, Karen had the great fortune to travel to Ecuador with family and friends. Scuba diving for a week in the Galapagos was followed by land tours on 6 of the islands, snorkeling and birding and wildlife watching. She was so fortunate to see most of the northern flock of penguins, the most northern flock of penguins, along with many other endemic birds of the Galapagos. While not traveling, and we'll hear more about Ecuador, when Karen is not traveling, she is spending her time on a farm in Custer, Wisconsin with her husband, Mark, some goats, and a big garden. She devotes her time gardening, hiking, biking, swimming, cross-country skiing, generally playing outside. Her indoor pursuits, which many of us know, is the reading, the weaving, and actually I didn't know this one, playing music. So I'm intrigued now, because that is a piece of her I have not learned yet.
Okay.
So
we could have a jam session.
okay, well, don't ask me to play too much. I'm not very good, but I'll be there and I'll engage.
I've already got it.
All right, and she earned her BS in education and her master's in environmental ed from UWSP. She served on the board for Aldo Leopold Society since 1999. And of course, she is our current president. So what a great treat to have her kick off our presentation series, Karen. So thanks for being here.
Right, let me figure out, let's see, which buttons take us to the next. Is it the space bar?
Should be the arrows, or you can use the clicker.
The arrow keys.
Should be.
I don't want to do that. No, it's not hooked up to anything.
It's this one. So use these arrow keys right here.
There it goes.
Okay.
Okay. Well, like Susan said, we had the great good fortune to go on a trip to Ecuador. We initially planned to just see the Galapagos, but then we extended the trip to include the Ecuadorian Amazon, and we spent a few days in and around Quito. So beginning with the Galapagos Islands, they're 300 miles off the coast of Ecuador, out in the Pacific, and due to the distance and the ocean currents, the land is onto itself in terms of the flora and the fauna found there. And then the Andes Mountains divides the coastal region of the country from the Amazon basin. The mountainous terrain that has year-round snow on the peaks at the equator creates another unique zone where life differs dramatically than the other areas of the country. And then the Ecuadorian Amazon stretches from the eastern slopes of the Andes to the borders of Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. It's just a tiny part of the whole Amazon basin, but in the Yasuni National Park, you will find the most diverse terrestrial ecosystems on Earth, with more than 200 mammalian species, more than 650 bird species, 120 different reptiles, and 147 amphibian species. In 1989, it was UNESCO created it as a biosphere reserve. So here's the islands. Mark and I began the trip with 2 other friends from the Stevens Point area who we've gone scuba diving with many times. And then from Quito, we flew directly to this little island of Baltra, where the airport is. And then we got on a liveaboard boat for a week of underwater exploration. The boat took us here all the way up to Wolf and Darwin Islands. And we didn't see any other boats during the 4 days that we were up there. We didn't see any other people except the people on our boat. As we came back down south, along the east coast here of Isabella Island and over to Santiago. We did some diving there, and then we came back to Santa Cruz, and the city there is Puerto Ayora. And we met up with a different couple of friends where we did land tours of some of those islands in the Galapagos, as well as moving on to the Amazon. Let's see. Sorry, guys, this is all kind of new. Okay, so this is a big Galapagos shark. And you can see it following that little tiny pilotfish. And in a moment, you'll see us divers clinging to this big rock because the current is so strong, if you let go, it would just carry you away. And that shark got a little close. Anyway, so after 4 days, after a week of diving 4 times a day, they had us on the dive deck at dawn, basically. And we did our last dive of the day about 4 in the afternoon. We saw and did a lot. It was amazing. One thing we saw on land were these flightless cormorants, but we also saw them under the water. You see it? So, is this birdie? I don't know. Opinions? I've opened it. Yeah, Rob says it's birding, so it is. Okay. When we got back to Santa Cruz Island, this is the home of some of the giant tortoises. And the giant tortoises became nearly extinct due to early sailors and explorers who took them on board their ships for food. These tortoises were set upside down on their backs, and they can live for weeks that way until, I know it's horrible, until they were used for food. So the numbers of tortoises have increased due to careful monitoring and conservation efforts. They can live over 100 years, as you probably know. The oldest recorded, her name was Harriet. She lived 175 years old. Galapagos tortoises live on 7 of the Galapagos Islands. On the islands that are humid and have high lands, the tortoises are larger with dome shells and short necks like these guys. But the tortoises that live on the smaller arid islands, they're more saddleback shaped shells, and they have very long necks. Charles Darwin's observations of these differences on the second voyage of the Beagle in 1835 contributed to the development of his theory of evolution. It is believed that the tortoises dispersed from the continent of South America to the islands by floating on the water, as they are poor swimmers. Perhaps it was a mated pair or a female with eggs who made that initial journey about 2 million years ago. And it's likely that we'll never really know how they got there. We visited the Charles Darwin Research Station on Santa Cruz. And there you'll learn the history of the islands, all about Charles Darwin and his voyages on the Beagle, as well as their current conservation work. So today, Darwin finches are represented by about 15 species. And the Darwin's finches are Galapagos endemics, famously adapted for their specialized feeding behavior. Darwin's finches are not actually finches in the true sense, but are members of the tanager family, Theropidae. And they are derived from a single ancestor that arrived in the Galapagos from the mainland of South America, perhaps 3 million years ago. Each species of Darwin's finch is generally widely distributed in the Galapagos Islands and fills the same niche in each island. For the ground finches, there's the smaller, medium, and large ground finch. And The ground finch feeds mostly on seeds, and they've developed a very thick bill to facilitate the consumption of hard materials. And the ground finches are further specialized to eat seeds of a particular size. So the large ground finch is the largest species of Darwin's finch and has the thickest beak for opening the toughest seeds. I found those finches very difficult to photograph. And this is my best shot of a Darwin's finch. It had a snack with us at the Darwin Research Center station. And it's one of the ground finches. I think it's a medium ground finch, but yeah, for a finch, right? Because they're not really finches. So then we went to Lafay and Pinzon Islands. And these are uninhabited islands. In fact, most of the islands are protected from development. This is a lava gull. It's the rarest gull in the world. The entire population is endemic to the Galapagos Islands and is estimated at about 400 pairs. Although this is a rare gull, it was right there downtown on the walkway by the harbor as we picked up water taxis to go to the next islands. These are marine iguanas. And our guide explained that since the animals of the Galapagos evolved without human predation, they are what is called as biologically naive. Tourists are told to stay at least 3 feet from the wildlife, but the wildlife seems not to have gotten that message. They will walk right up to you. Sea lions. We saw them on land, we saw them under the water. Pups were a favorite. They're about 3 weeks old. And the older ones seem pretty sleepy. When they're on land, they just kind of lay around, it seems. Or find a park bench to relax on. Underwater, though, they literally would come into the water and put on a show for us divers. They're just so agile and fast under the water. And one actually playfully grabbed the swim fin of one of the divers that we were with. Yeah, it's pretty funny. So Isabella Island. It's one of the largest islands in the Galapagos, and it is the home of the largest population of the Galapagos penguins. You can see how warm and tropical these islands are. So how is it that those penguins survive there? The Galapagos penguin is the only penguin found north of the equator. The northern tip of Isabella crosses the equator, meaning that some of the Galapagos penguins live in the northern hemisphere, the only penguins to do so. It's the cool waters of the Humboldt and Cromwell currents that allow them to survive despite the tropical latitude. The week we were there, the penguins were molting. And they eat a lot the week before they molt, and then they just stand on the rock for a week till their new waterproof feathers come in. So again, we see that biological naiveness where we were snorkeling and it just stood on the rock. So where did these come from? We talked about the tortoises getting there. We talked about the Galapagos finches getting there. So it's thought that many years ago, the Humboldt Current is believed to have brought penguins from the mainland of South America again to the Galapagos, where they evolved in isolation into a separate species. The islands, such as Isabella, contained cold, nutrient-rich waters that provided abundant food, assuring the survival and reproduction of the penguins. Over millions of years, the penguins underwent adaptations, developing unique features that enable their existence and allow them to thrive under these atypical circumstances. Today, the Galapagos penguins are amongst the smallest penguin species. The Galapagos penguin was listed as an endangered species in 2010. They think there's about 1,800 Galapagos penguins left. Sadly, there's a whole host of factors putting these small penguins in danger of extinction, including climate change, predation by humans, sea lions, and the Galapagos hawk. Introduced animals like dogs, cats, and rats also affect their population negatively. There are several diseases that they are vulnerable to as well. We were supposed to dive between the islands of Fernandina and Isabella. And we were looking forward to being able to see the penguins underwater in their habitat there. But because the red-footed boobies like to come and perch on the dive boat, and the fact that those birds might carry avian flu, we weren't able to do those dives as the health of the penguins was a priority. While snorkeling though, I did have one zip right underneath me and its feathers were just all silvery with air bubbles. So then we went to visit North Seymour and South Plaza Islands. And it was my first luxury yacht adventure. We went on this boat called the Wind Rose, and the family that owns that boat sort of offsets the cost of running the boat by inviting tourists on board. I knew we were going on some sort of big boat, but I didn't know it was going to be a yacht. And they had a chef on board that cooked us lunch and snacks. But then our local guide came along too and took us on hikes and a snorkel trip. Darwin's finches were notoriously difficult to photograph, but I have it on authority that this right here is a cactus finch. We also found these swallow-tailed gulls for the second time. The first time I saw them was at night on the dive boat, and I was just mystified by them as they dove and circled and hunted for food at night in the boat's wake. And they looked sort of ghostly in the dim light from the boat. I could not figure out what they were. And then I learned that they are a nocturnal gull. This was a total surprise to me. I did not know there were nocturnal gulls. And in fact, this is the world's only nocturnal gull. Rob, you're nodding your head, you knew this. The white patch above the beak here helps the chicks find the parent's mouth while they're trying to feed at night. Yeah. You can see how arid North Seymour Island is, but it's got some interesting wildlife and bird life. While on the boat, I noticed the size difference of what appeared to be two different species of frigate bird. I have seen great frigate birds numerous times, but I had never even heard of magnificent frigate bird. And I did find them to be magnificent. It's so good when birds are aptly named. Watch these aerial gymnastics. Look at how big they are. You can hear them. And they weren't uncommon by any means. So in the middle, you see the male magnificent frigate bird, and on the right is an immature bird. And then here you can compare the plumage of the male and the female as they sit together on their little nest. And again, it's a good example of that biological naiveness, because you can walk up to these nests and the birds display absolutely no defensiveness. So Javier Suarez from Galapagos by Local Guides set up our tours for us. And the guides were just fantastic, absolutely fantastic. In fact, Ecuador has a program where they train young people to be guides. And on one of the snorkel tours in Isabella, We met at least a dozen of these incredible students. They're so knowledgeable. And so now it was time to say goodbye to the land of the boobies. These are the three that you would find in the Galapagos. But if I had a nickel for every piece of claptrap tourist souvenir on sale that said, "I love boobies," I would probably have been able to pay for the trip. Yes, they are very lovable birds with their comical walk and their large feet, and they are oh so graceful in flight. So then off we go to the Amazon. So we flew back to Quito, and then we flew to a little town called Coca, and this is the Napo River. You can see it's a pretty large river, and it is a major tributary of the Amazon River, the confluence of which is at the border between Brazil and Ecuador. In August of 2023, a referendum on oil extraction in the Yasuni National Park passed, requiring a halt to drilling oil in the national park. However, we still saw a lot of barges, tankers, and roads into the park as we traveled along the Napo River. The Amazon basin holds about 40% of Ecuador's oil supply. However, one group of people native to the Yasuni National Park took it upon themselves 20 years ago to create a more sustainable life for them and their families by rejecting work with the oil extraction industry and by successfully creating an ecotourism center. So after we got off the bigger boat that took us down the Napo, we get here to the Anangu community. This is a little blackwater river called the Anangu River that feeds into the Napo. And we got into these little canoes, and our guides for the week, Mauricio and Henry, paddled us in the canoe to the wildlife reserve. Yasuni National Park is arguably the most biologically diverse spot on Earth, terrestrial spot on Earth. And the park is at the center of a small zone where amphibian, bird, mammal, and vascular plant diversity all reach their maximum levels within the Western Hemisphere. And this is where we stayed. The Eco Lodge is run and managed by the Aboriginal Anangu Quechua community, where they live and protect an area of over 200 square kilometers or 82 square miles. In this region of highly diverse flora and fauna, the community decided to give up its legitimate right to hunt and fish, and thanks to this, nature has thrived here. In contrast to its depletion in other parts of the Amazon basin. This ecotourism project includes conservation of the most pristine Amazon rainforest within the Yasuni National Park. They built the center themselves without bringing in any heavy machinery. They made the commitment to build it as sustainably as possible. All of the material, all the building materials and furnishings were brought in by canoe, which is amazing. So the decision of the community to concentrate on tourism and conservation has been successful and is being used as a model for other indigenous people around the world. I'll just on an aside sort of, they do have a video on YouTube, if you look it up, on how this place was developed and their commitment to sustainability. It's really quite a story. The community also built a school, encouraging continued education, thus preventing their young people from migrating away from the community, and increasing opportunities for the future of their youth. From here, the community managed to increase high school attendance, and in 2012, saw the first class graduate in sustainable technology with the main objective of sustainable community tourism. 50% of their students belong to the neighboring communities and the other 50% belonging to the Anangu community. The overall number of students is about 136. Education is free, mostly covered by the state, but also supported by the Anangu community. As we paddled up that river, the Hoatzin was the first exciting bird we saw, but after a few days, it became a bit common. The Hoatzin is notable for its chicks having primitive claws on 2 of their wing digits. The species also is unique in possessing a digestive system capable of fermentation in order to break down plant matter, a trait more commonly known in ruminant animals and some primates. Due to the digestive process, they apparently stink. Mauricio, our guide, called them stinky turkeys. We saw some really beautiful herons. This is a capped heron. And a rubescent tiger heron. Oh, I gotta click the right button. Boat-billed heron. Striated heron. And the kokoi heron. This is the Agami heron, and that's a photo I took. But it's also known as the hummingbird heron. And this is a photo I just had to grab off the internet just to show you the mating plumage of this bird. Our first day held a real surprise. As we were going to get into the canoe in the morning, Mauricio heard the alarm call of the capuchin monkeys. You can hear them. That. And so Mauricio knew there was a predator nearby. So we paddled over to this tree and found this harpy eagle with a young capuchin monkey. And we spent a thrilling 20 minutes with this eagle until it finished its meal, did a little preening, and then flew off. So to get some perspective on how rare it is to see a harpy, Mauricio has been a guide for 15 to 20 years there. This was only the 4th time he'd ever seen one. Other raptors, those who know me well know that I am a bit partial to raptors. And we did well on raptors. I said to Mauricio at the end of the day, I said, we did pretty well on raptors today. So this was a black-collared hawk. It is a fishing specialist, and their talons are especially adapted with conical shaped spikes to help capture and hang on to the fish that they catch. This is the slate-colored hawk. It's a very small hawk. It hunts for frogs, snakes, and other small mammals, maybe some crabs, but often you find it at the water's edge. This was another unusual sighting. Mauricio hadn't ever seen one there before. One of the other guides also saw it and confirmed the sighting. This is a roadside hawk. It's common throughout its range from Mexico through Central and South America, east of the Andes. Vagrants have occasionally been found in Texas, with the possible exception, the guide said, of dense rainforests. However, we were in a dense rainforest. But the roadside hawk is adapted to most ecosystems in its range, apparently. They're generalists as hunters and often hunt by sitting on a perch and then dropping down to capture prey. I think this was a slender-billed kite. It was only ID'd as a snail kite, but I'm sure it wasn't like a Everglades kite or something like that. And then we saw a double-toothed kite a couple times. We saw lots of parrots and macaws. This is a clay lick. And in the morning, large numbers of parrots and parakeets, this is a little mass of parrots, this is a mass of parrots. They come into this clay lick to get minerals And then once it's time, they just all get up and leave. But they get minerals from the clay that helps them digest the partially ripened fruit that they like to eat. We saw blue and yellow macaws. This was late one afternoon. These macaws, we sat in the canoe for a long time waiting for this shot. They nest near the bottom of a hollow palm tree. And you could hear the adults making their way up that hollow trunk. Finally, both adults emerged and flew off to feed late in the afternoon. But we saw the blue and yellows several times. This was quite an experience. On one of the hikes, or after we visited the clay lick, we hiked into this spot, and the macaws come to this spring. You can see kind of here, you can see this domed area. There's a little trickle that comes out there, and they come there to get minerals as well. We waited about 2 hours for them to come in. We could hear them calling, we could hear their wings flapping. Finally, one landed and then more followed. And it turns out that there was a woolly monkey nearby. And they were just suspicious of coming in. But then after the last of the scarlet macaws flew off, the cobalt-winged parrots came in. We did a lot of, we didn't have spotting scopes, so we took a lot of pictures through binoculars. So here are the cobalt-winged parakeets at the clay lick, or at the spring. And then they didn't stay real long because a woolly monkey came in, chased them. Then this tower was built, I don't know exactly when it was built, but it's 36 meters tall, and it was built against a big ceiba tree. To get there, we started paddling the canoe about 4:30 in the morning. Then we hiked in the dark through the rainforest for at least half an hour or more, and climbed the tower in the dark. But then, from the top, we watched and heard the rainforest come to life at sunrise. You can see epiphytic orchids growing on the branches. So birds from the tower. We saw this channel-billed toucan. And their bills are about 5.5 inches long, but they're very lightweight, like all toucans are, so that they can still fly. And despite its size, a toucan's long reach allows it to plunder tree cavities and nests in search of other birds' eggs and chicks. They'll also eat insects as well as fruits. We saw several ivory-billed aracari, and they forage in the forest's upper level in the canopy, typically in pairs or in small groups. There are few details known about their diet, but it appears that they mostly eat fruit and possibly some arthropods. We saw gilded barbet. Its natural habitats are tropical moist lowland forests and woodlands. It occasionally occurs in lowlands, but also ranges into the lower foothills of the eastern Andes. It too mostly eats fruit. This is a spangled cotinga. It was far away. We got this picture of it. And this is a better photo from the internet. This bird also mostly eats fruits, but it's also been recorded feeding on insects. They are found in the upper canopy of the rainforest. Males will often perch like this one is in the very top of a tree above the forest floor. An interesting fact is that the spangled cotinga and other members of the genus Cotinga do not sing or vocalize, although they have been heard to make a whistling sound with their wings during flight. Due to the beauty of their feathers, this bird has been hunted for plumage. But I think at least in Yasuni, in this area, they're protected now. We saw a mind-blowing number of tanagers, flame-crested, orange-headed palm and opal rump, but I think the paradise tanager takes the cake. And then Mauricio spotted a scarlet tanager. And I got all excited, and I'm trying to tell him that they migrate to where I live. And he looked at me a little skeptically until I showed him this photo taken from our deck. And he looked so surprised, and he just said to me, "I never knew." So that was sweet. We saw a few raptors from the tower. Again, that double-toothed snail kite. We saw a bat falcon, which, as you guessed, eats bats. And the red-throated caracara, which I thought would feed on carrion like a vulture, but it's unique among caracaras. It feeds mostly on the larvae of bees and wasps, but also takes adult insects, fruits, and berries. It is found from southern Mexico through parts of Central and South America, south to Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil. And it will be found in lowland forest as well as montane forests. And the guans. Mauricio told us that guans used to be hunted a lot by the Anangu Quechua people, but hunting them is now largely halted due to the community's agreement to quit hunting and logging to protect the forest. So the numbers of the guans over the past 20 years has increased. My guess is they taste like chicken. I saw a couple with pecker, crimson crested and the yellow tufted. We saw 28 total species from the tower. Including all of these. This isn't a complete list, but most of them. A bare-necked fruit crow. And then it was time to thank our tour guides and leave Napo. But before we go, just want you to hear the sounds along the Anangu River as we were paddling out. That's one male howler monkey making that sound. And then we found ourselves back in Quito, where we toured some of the old cathedrals. We rode horseback up into the Andes. But our final day in Ecuador, we went to Yanacocha Preserve to see birds. Yanacocha is about an hour's drive north and east of Quito, and it's in the Andean cloud forest. And we lucked out and had just a spectacular day with gorgeous views. And we began the day with the wonders of hummers. So many hummers. We saw purple-back thornbill. They're just tiny little hummingbird with a tiny little beak, buff-winged starfronts. And we were thrilled to find a sapphire-vented puffleg. You can see its little white puffs right here on its little tiny legs. I asked Santiago, our guide for the day, what the purpose of the puffs on the legs are. And he said, since both male and female have the puffs, he thought it wasn't for sexual selection. So we concluded that with the chilly, damp nights in the cloud forest, the puffs must keep their tiny little legs warm. We saw the shining sunbeam hummingbird was pretty common. They forage for nectar at all levels from the ground to the treetops. It feeds on a wide variety of bromeliads, vines, and trees, including these wild fuchsias. The male will defend its plant source from other birds. As you can kind of see here, they're a little defensive, even of the hummingbird feeder. But again, I think shining sunbeam is a really good name for these little bright little birds. And then the sword-billed hummingbird. Look at this ridiculous beak. Oh. Their beak is so long that they have to hover over the nest in order to feed their young. They can't perch and feed them. And you can kind of see that here in the video too. How they're coming into the hummingbird feeder and trying to manipulate so they can get their beak into the feeder to get some sugar. No. And then we saw the great sapphire wing. It's like maybe the second largest hummingbird in the world. It's 15.5 to 19 centimeters long. But they are, I think there's one other hummingbird in Patagonia that's somewhat bigger than this, but. The slow-mo video on the phone was able to capture this. And then a nice assortment of tanagers once again. These 4 species of mountain tanagers thrive in the tropical and subtropical montane forests of northern South America. They're just gorgeous birds. We saw 3 different species of ant pitas. This is the equatorial one that I got a photo of because the park ranger was throwing out some worms, maybe even some mealworms early in the morning. These are forest birds that tend to feed at or near the ground, since many are specialist anteaters. Most are drab in appearance with shades of rusty brown, black, and white being their dominant tones. Compared to other birds that specialize in following ants, this family is the most tied to the ground. They have long, powerful legs, which gives them that upright posture, and an essentially vestigial tail that aids its ant hunting lifestyle. Hieranulates are in the family Tyrannidae, and they are sweet little flycatchers. We were able to spot. And then flower piercers. There's a glossy flower piercer on the left and a masked on the right. And you can see this unique little beak. It's slightly upturned, and they use that to pierce flowers to get the nectar. We found 32 different species during our 8-hour stay at Yanacocha. And then we returned to the hotel, we packed, napped a little, and headed to the airport for the midnight flight back to the United States. We packed in just as much as possible on this 3-week trip to Ecuador. There's so many other stories to tell, but this story has been mostly about the birds, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Early on, I don't remember what kind of bird it was, but one of them was a leaf eater. When you were in the Galapagos, I think it was. I forget what kind of things, but something was called a leaf eater. I didn't know there were birds that ate leaves.
Oh, that picture of the Galapagos finches? There is one that said leaf eater.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I can't tell you, I mean.
I don't know any bird that eats leaves. Except that one apparently.
That one does. Maybe there isn't much else to eat, so they had to adapt to leaves. So we saw, I counted maybe 110 total birds. And Rob, I did eBird list just for you. You can look up my entire species list from the trip. Yeah, Ned?
I've heard that the penguin species that's there is only on Isabella, not the other islands. And then, I don't know if you saw it, but is it on the side that's near Santa Cruz or the other side?
The other side by Fernandia. Fernandia, yeah.
You saw it?
Yeah.
Yep,
They
And what-
were pretty common on Isabella. They were,
were they?
when you were in the harbors and like that, they're just swimming around and, yeah.
I wasn't sure what elevation they'd be at, because they've got some high mountains there on Isabella. And they're right at sea level, of course, obviously,
Huh?
right at sea level.
Yeah, they're on Bartolomeo. They're on a few of the other islands, but they're mostly on the west coast of those islands.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Mhm. You'll see them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I missed them on my first trip and I was really disappointed.
Oh, yeah. You have to, that's why you have to go to Isabella.
Yeah, we didn't go to Isabella. That was the problem.
You'll see them. Anything else I can tell you about?
How many species of those were hummingbirds?
I don't know. I have to go back and look at my list.
15.
The hummingbirds. Let's see. I don't think we saw hummingbirds in the Amazon, but they didn't have feeders up like at Yanacocha. Yeah. And I mean, the birds from the Amazon, that wasn't even all of them. I couldn't even put them all in. There's so many. And then, also in the Amazon, we saw the giant river otters. We saw 6 different species of monkeys, 2 different species of sloth. We only spent 3 days there, and it's amazing what we saw. Wow. So, Janet and Michael, are you going there?
We're going to the Galapagos.
Galapagos. I didn't know how far you were gonna go. No. Good. Anything else? Okay, then I'm going to tell you about what's coming up in Audubon for the year. Our first field trip is Saw-Whet Owls at Linwood Springs Research Station on October 11th, Friday. And we're gonna start about 7:30 there. It's a late field trip, but they're owls, so we have to. And then Dr. Stanley Temple will be here in October to tell us about Leopold and his legacy. And if you haven't ever heard him, you'll want to take that in for sure. And then we have some other big trips planned, some overnight trips. Rob, do you want to tell us a little bit about those?
So this spring we have sandhills on the Platte River coming up in March. So that'll be cool. If you've never seen sandhills as they stage in their migration, they get 500,000 every spring that stage on the Platte River there. And then in June, we have a kind of a camping, or you can get a hotel room, and we'll be staying up at Cracks Meadows National Wildlife Refuge up in Grantsburg. It's a beautiful property. You can get sharp-tailed grouse there, yellow rail, some of the rare sparrows nest up there, and it's 33,000 acres. I think there's somewhere in the range of 800 species of plant have been reported on the property as well. It's a really neat area to explore, so I think that covers each of them. But yeah, exciting
And then we
stuff.
have Bob's trips, What's Up on the Bluff in May, and then snowshoeing Hartman's Creek. What did we say?
Emmons.
Emmons Creek,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
In the winter as well as others. On the back table are birdseed sale flyers and the complete list of all our trips and programs for the year. So be sure to pick that up on your way out. You can help us distribute some of those birdseed sale flyers, get them in people's hands. If you want to take a couple extra and hand them out to neighbors and family, that'd be most appreciated. Or if you have a place at work or something to put a stack where people might find them, that'd be great. Anything else?
And if you do take those extra flyers, please encourage people to do a pre-order because we just can't guarantee there'll be enough for walk-up sales. So it's really important that everybody get their orders in and not just say, oh, well, we can just get by at the sale. Yes, you can, and we'll be happy to sell it to you then. But there's just, when we run out, we run out.
So how it works is JMAR loads the semi, but they need to know how much to put on the semi. And so the only way to sort of, know that is through those pre-orders. That's why it's so important. You can also go to the website and order there. Go to the sale tab. What's the tab? Sale tab.
Ways to give, I think.
No, it's not under ways to give. Isn't there a,
I think it's under both, but it's also under the shop, all of the
Shop.
inventory, yeah.
that's the one.
Mhm.
All right.
It's not a very big website, everything.
Okay, you can't get that last one.
And if
So-
you don't know, just ask.
Yeah. All right, thank you all for being here tonight.